The gods held court for 80 years trying to decide who should rule Egypt. The trials they devised to settle the question were so bizarre, so violent, and sometimes so inappropriate that modern scholars still debate what the ancient Egyptians meant by including them in sacred texts. The Contendings of Horus and Set is an actual ancient Egyptian papyrus dating to around 1160 BCE, now preserved in the Chester Beatty Library. Unlike the heroic battles we covered previously, this version of the Horus-Set conflict focuses on the divine court proceedings, the strange contests ordered by the gods to determine legitimate rule, and the often shocking tactics both claimants employed. It's mythology that feels more like courtroom drama mixed with absurdist comedy and occasional horror. What makes this text so fascinating is its complexity and sometimes contradictory tone. The gods behave in ways that seem undignified, petty, and even cruel. The contests include transformations, deceptions, sexual violence, magical battles, and interventions from unexpected sources. Modern readers sometimes struggle with this text because it doesn't fit our expectations of how sacred mythology should sound. But that discomfort reveals how sophisticated and multifaceted Egyptian religious thought actually was. If you're intrigued by this stranger side of Egyptian mythology, subscribe to Snap Old Myths. We're exploring the full spectrum of Egyptian stories, from the sublime to the shocking, and your support helps us continue bringing these complex ancient texts to modern audiences with the context and nuance they deserve. The papyrus begins with the Ennead, the council of 9 great gods, assembling to hear the cases of Horus and Set. Ra presides as judge, though his impartiality is questionable from the start. The text records that Ra initially favors Set, appreciating his strength and his service as defender of Ra's solar bark against the chaos serpent Apophis. But the other gods, led by Thoth and influenced by Isis's advocacy for her son, support Horus's claim as rightful heir. The debate becomes heated immediately. Set argues that his strength and proven ability to maintain order make him the superior choice. The papyrus quotes him saying that Horus is too young, untested, and weak to handle the responsibilities of kingship. Horus counters that hereditary right supersedes personal qualities, that denying the son his father's throne would undermine the very concept of legitimate succession and cosmic justice. Mat itself, unable to reach consensus through debate, the gods decree that Horus and Set should engage in combat to prove their worth, but instead of straightforward battle, they order the contestants to transform into hippopotamuses and fight underwater in the Nile, with victory going to whoever can remain submerged longest without surfacing for air. This strange choice of contest form already signals that the contendings will not follow conventional patterns. Isis, watching from the shore, becomes anxious for her son's safety. She cannot see what is happening beneath the water's surface, and maternal worry overwhelms divine restraint. She creates a copper harpoon through her magic and casts it into the water, hoping to strike Set, but her first throw accidentally strikes Horus instead. When he cries out in pain and identifies himself, Isis immediately pulls the harpoon free, apologizing for her error. Isis throws the harpoon again, and this time it strikes Set, but Set, wounded and indignant, appeals directly to Isis using their sibling bond. The text records him asking, "What have I done to you, Isis, my sister? Call off your harpoon." This emotional manipulation works. Isis, moved by Set's appeal to family loyalty, withdraws the harpoon and frees him. This act of mercy toward Set enrages Horus so completely that he emerges from the water in fury. What follows is one of the most shocking moments in Egyptian mythology. Horus, in his rage at his mother's perceived betrayal, cuts off her head. The text states this plainly without euphemism or mitigation. Horus then flees into the mountains, carrying his mother's head, transforming the trial into something far darker than anyone had intended. The gods are appalled, and Ra decrees that Horus must be found and punished for this terrible act of violence against his own mother. Set finds Horus resting in an oasis in the mountains. The text describes what happens next with startling frankness. Set tears out both of Horus's eyes, buries them in the ground where they transform into lotus flowers, and leaves his blinded rival helpless in the wilderness. This mutilation carries deep symbolic meaning, as the eyes, particularly in Egyptian thought, represented not just physical sight, but divine vision, truth-seeing ability, and cosmic awareness. But Hathor, the goddess of love who can also manifest as fierce Sekhmet when needed, finds the blinded Horus and heals him through her magic. Different versions of the text describe different healing methods. Some say she used gazelle milk, others mention more complex rituals, but all agree that Hathor's intervention restores Horus's sight and returns him to the contest. This healing represents another turning point, demonstrating that divine power supports Horus despite his violent outburst and Set's brutal retaliation. With physical combat proving inconclusive and increasingly violent, the contest shifts to stranger territory involving ritual dominance and sexual power. Set invites Horus to a feast, offering what appears to be friendly reconciliation. But Set has contaminated lettuce, which was considered an aphrodisiac and was sacred to Set himself, with his own semen, intending to ritually dominate Horus through consumption and establish superior masculine power according to Egyptian cultural logic. Horus, warned by his mother Isis about Set's tricks, catches Set's semen in his hands rather than consuming the contaminated lettuce. He then shows his hands to Isis, who immediately cuts them off and throws them in the Nile, creating new hands for Horus through her magic. This might seem like an overreaction to modern readers, but Isis understood that even contact with the contaminated substance could be used against Horus in the ritual power struggle that was unfolding. Isis then devises a counter-strategy that turns Set's plan completely on its head. She takes Horus's semen and spreads it on lettuce in Set's garden, which Set then consumes unknowingly. This reversal of the attempted domination becomes crucial in the next phase of the contest, as both Set and Horus will claim to have ritually dominated the other, and the truth will need to be established before the divine court. When the gods reconvene, both Horus and Set claim to have dominated the other sexually, which in Egyptian culture would establish dominance and undermine the opponent's claim to masculine authority and legitimate kingship. Ra calls upon Thoth, whose magic can reveal truth that ordinary perception cannot detect, to determine whose claim is accurate. The text describes Thoth calling out to the semen of both gods to reveal their locations. Set's semen, which he believed was in Horus, answers from the Nile where Isis had thrown Horus's severed hands. This public revelation that Set's semen never actually entered or contaminated Horus is humiliating for Set, proving his scheme failed completely. Then Thoth calls to Horus's semen, and it answers from inside Set's body, having been consumed in the contaminated lettuce. The implications are devastating for Set's claim. He has been ritually dominated by the very opponent he sought to dominate. The text then describes an even stranger occurrence. The semen inside Set takes form and emerges from his forehead as a golden sun disk. Thoth takes this disk and places it on his own head as a crown, a moment of bizarre imagery that scholars still debate. Some interpret this as representing divine truth emerging from deception, others as a symbol of Horus's superior claim manifesting even from Set's body, and still others as commentary on the transmutation of sexual power into cosmic authority. Set, humiliated and enraged by these revelations, refuses to accept the verdict and demands yet another contest. The pattern of the contendings becomes clear. Set will never accept defeat gracefully and will continuously demand new trials, new opportunities to prove himself, new chances to overturn the growing evidence that Horus is the rightful king. The gods, exhausted but bound by Maat to give both claimants fair hearing, agreed to continue. The next trial seems almost whimsical after the intensity of what came before. The gods decree a boat race on the Nile, with the winner earning points toward the final judgment. But there's a strange requirement. The boats must be made of stone. This impossible specification is another example of the gods testing not just strength but cunning, magical ability, and creative problem-solving. How the contestants approach this challenge reveals their characters. Set, literal-minded and confident in his strength, actually builds a boat entirely from stone. He believes his divine power will allow him to sail even such an impossible vessel. This decision reveals Set's nature. He approaches problems through brute force and direct confrontation, trusting in his strength to overcome physical limitations. When his stone boat immediately sinks in the Nile, Set's rage at being outwitted overshadows any recognition of his own foolishness. Horus, more cunning, builds a wooden boat but covers it with plaster painted to look like stone. This solution honors the letter of the requirement while acknowledging the practical reality that stone boats cannot float. When Horus's boat successfully sails while Set sinks, the victory seems clear. But Set, refusing to accept this defeat, transforms into a hippopotamus and attacks Horus's boat from underwater, trying to destroy it and invalidate the contest results through violence once again. The pattern of contests followed by Set's violent rejection of unfavorable results begins to wear on the divine court. The gods grow frustrated with Set's inability to accept any outcome that doesn't favor him. His constant demands for new trials, and his willingness to violate the rules whenever he's losing. Yet they remain bound by Maat to continue the process, to give both claimants full opportunity to make their cases, even when one claimant exploits this fairness to avoid ever accepting a final verdict. The Papyrus records various other contests and arguments that fill the 80 years of contendings. Some are lost or fragmentary in the surviving text. Others involve transformations into different animals, magical battles, appeals to different gods for support, and legal arguments about the interpretation of divine law and precedent. The sheer variety of approaches reflects the Egyptian understanding that legitimate authority needed to be established through multiple forms of proof, not just a single test. Finally, in exhaustion and frustration, the gods appeal to Neith, the ancient creator goddess whose wisdom predates even Ra's rule. They send her a letter describing the deadlock and asking for her judgment. The text of her response is preserved in the Papyrus, and it's remarkably direct and unambiguous. She writes that Horus should receive the throne as his rightful inheritance, for to deny the son his father's position would violate Maat itself, the cosmic principle of justice and order that even gods must obey. But Neith, wise in ways that transcend simple justice, also addresses Set's legitimate grievances and wounded pride. She suggests that Set's strength and power should be acknowledged through expanded dominion over the desert and foreign lands, and that he should be given to goddesses, Anot and Astarte, as wives to compensate for his loss of the throne. This solution attempts to satisfy both justice and practical necessity, giving Horus his right while giving Set enough to prevent his chaotic nature from disrupting the cosmic order. Even with Neith's judgment, Set refuses immediate compliance. The text records him demanding personal combat with Horus one final time, believing he can still win through superior strength. This final battle is described in the Papyrus as particularly fierce, with both gods fighting with the accumulated fury of 80 years of conflict. They battle in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters, their combat shaking the foundations of reality itself. But the outcome, inevitable after Neith's judgment, sees Horus victorious. The text describes how even Ra, who had initially favored Set, acknowledges that justice has been served and Maat has been satisfied. Set is brought before the assembled gods and forced to formally acknowledge Horus as the rightful king of Egypt. The humiliation of this forced acknowledgement, for a god of Set's pride and power, is immense, yet necessary for cosmic order to be restored. The Contendings concludes not with Set's destruction but with his transformation and reassignment. He becomes the lord of the desert, the master of storms and foreign lands, a god whose chaotic, violent nature is channeled toward protecting Egypt from external threats rather than disrupting internal order. He continues to serve as Ra's defender against Apophis during the nightly journey through the underworld, using his strength and aggression against the enemies of cosmic order rather than against order itself. The Contendings of Horus and Set is one of ancient Egypt's strangest and most complex mythological texts, mixing cosmic significance with shocking violence, high drama with bizarre comedy, profound philosophy with crude humor. It reveals an Egyptian religious sensibility far more sophisticated and multifaceted than simplistic readings of their mythology suggest. The gods are not perfect moral exemplars but complex beings with flaws, biases and contradictions, yet the underlying commitment to Maat, to cosmic justice and legitimate order, guides the outcome despite all the chaos and confusion along the way. The text teaches that establishing justice is not a simple or clean process, that competing legitimate claims can create genuine dilemmas, and that sometimes the resolution requires wisdom that transcends simple rules to balance justice with practical necessity and cosmic balance. This video was created by combining human research and scriptwriting with an AI-assisted visual production, bringing these ancient texts to life for modern audiences. For more Egyptian mythology, related products, and the tools we use to create this content, check the links in the description below.